Well, we did it for the 2000s, so I think it's only right that we do the same thing for the 2010s. And I'm not gonna lie to y'all, while doing my homework for this video, I've come to the conclusion that the 2010s might get just a little bit too much of a bad rep. Now, don't get me wrong, it is far from perfect. There were some absolute lows during this time. I mean, dog food. Need I say more? But then there's some people that would genuinely pretend like the 2010s just had nothing good to offer, and that to me is a bold-faced lie. Because when I take a look at this decade as a whole, a lot of my favorite matches, moments, and more importantly for this video, feuds happened in these years. And lucky for y'all, I'm here to talk about the very best of the best. Ladies and gentlemen, it's your boy Mo if you don't already know, and this is the best WWE feud from every year of the 2010s. And like I told you at the end of the 2000s video, yes, NXT is included. So let's do this damn thing. So let's just get this out the way. I am not picking John Cena versus the Nexus. Look, I get it. It was arguably the biggest storyline for the WWE in 2010, but, well, one of the next videos is going to be me breaking down how that was a generational fumble, so no. So I'm going to go ahead with the feud that was actually the second chapter of a 4-year saga, and that was what went on to be the streak versus the career, which was Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker. Simply put, this was just a masterclass in character work, especially on Shawn's end. Consumed by the fact that he wasn't able to break the streak the year before, he made it his mission to get his rematch to put the Dead Man 17-0 streak to a stop. First straight up challenging Taker to a rematch at WrestleMania, but Mean Mark just was not interested at all. He already proved himself. So then Shawn enters the Rumble so he can try and get that match with Undertaker, guaranteed, who was the World Heavyweight Champion at that time. And he has one of the greatest performances in Royal Rumble history, even super kicking his best friend Triple H out of the Rumble, because it was all about avenging that loss from Mania 25. But when Shawn eventually comes up short, he just loses it, hitting the sweet chin music on the referee for stopping him from trying to get back in the match. And at that point, it looked like his dreams were dashed and he'd have to move on, with Triple H trying to keep the whole DX thing going. But Shawn mentally was just too far gone. His ego just not allowing him to let it go, to the point he got so desperate he would not only cost Undertaker the world title inside the Elimination Chamber the next month, but in turn giving the title to Chris Jericho, the same man he had a literal blood feud with just under 2 years before. And well, it worked in terms of getting Taker to finally accept the match, but it was only under one condition. Shawn had to put his 26-year career on the line. And man, that line from Shawn where he says, "If I don't beat you at WrestleMania, I have no career," just perfect. And of course, that would then lead to, frankly, one of the greatest WrestleMania main events of all time. Top 3, if you ask me, ending with Shawn going out in the most Shawn Michaels way possible. One, with yet another WrestleMania classic under his belt, but also being as defiant as ever, knowing it was all over for him. And obviously, he never wrestled again. Listen, he said that match don't count, all right? You gonna tell him he's wrong? I'm sure as hell not. And look, I'm gonna just use this entry to give a big old salute to the whole 4-year story that Undertaker would go on to have with DX at WrestleMania, because that was absolute peak, but I gotta give this list a little bit more variety, so there's that. 2011, man. What a weird time to be a fan. This is where it felt like WWE was honestly just doing anything. 2 commentators put on arguably the worst match in WrestleMania history. Snooki had a WrestleMania match for some reason. The Rock stands tall to end WrestleMania 27 despite not actually wrestling in the main event. Have I mentioned how much I hate WrestleMania 27? Because I really do. But luckily for them, WWE had a story that fell into their lap with CM Punk versus John Cena, where the stars aligned in a way that I don't think we've ever seen. When Punk first told us that he was going to do the most honest thing that we'd ever seen, we didn't really understand what he meant at the time. But then after Punk became the #1 contender for Cena's WWE title at Money in the Bank, he gets on the mic and lets the world know his plan to leave the WWE with the title, as his contract would expire on July 17th, the night of Money in the Bank, which was real. His contract was actually set to expire and he hadn't re-signed at that point. But that wasn't it for Punk's honesty, because then there's obviously the pipe bomb, which elevated this feud from simply being intriguing to revolutionary for its time. Punk sitting on that stage, venting all these very real frustrations that he felt about his placement, and painting John Cena as the symbol for everything he hates. And a lot of those frustrations Punk laid out on that night resonated with a lot of people and hooked so many people in, some of which who had even stopped watching WWE before that. Because in a time where WWE was as cookie cutter as it could get, that promo, even if it was just for a second, made you stop and question, whoa, was that real? And seemingly overnight, CM Punk went from being this hated heel to a beloved anti-hero. And that would take us into Money in the Bank in Punk's hometown of Chicago for that match, and what more can I really say about it that hasn't been said before? There are very few matches in WWE history that checked off the boxes that this match did. From the really good in-ring action because Punk and Cena were just wrestling soulmates, as we'd go on to see throughout the years, to that environment that those fans in Chicago created that night. And then when Punk actually won the title and hopped the barricade, blowing the kiss to Vince, we all knew that night we had just witnessed something absolutely legendary. Now, unfortunately, the summer of Punk got a little messy after this because they bring Punk back literally 8 days after he said he was going to basically steal the title. But hey, we got the underrated rematch at SummerSlam where Punk actually becomes undisputed champion after controversially pinning Cena. But that's kind of where things went left with Punk for no reason because WWE just completely lost the plot at this point. Because they pulled 2 swerves for the sake of a swerve by having Kevin Nash beat up Punk and then having Alberto Del Rio cash in to end SummerSlam. And then even more bafflingly, having Triple H beat Punk for legit no reason at Night of Champions the next month. But you know what? Most of that has nothing to do with John Cena, so we can just ignore all of that for today. But man, those few weeks between June and July going into Money in the Bank, you just had to be there. Because even if they tried their best, I can't see WWE recreating anything like this. And well, for that, this will always be special. John Cena versus The Rock. Not even a question about it. Look, when you have the world talking the way this Clash of Generations had people talking, how can I pick anything else? And I'm not just talking about the wrestling world. It was wrestling fans that were already locked in with the product. But then you even had people who didn't even watch wrestling talking about this. Hell, my mom, who doesn't care about wrestling at all, was interested in what they had going on. And you can argue no match before or since has created the buzz that this one did. Shoot, let's be nerds for a second and look at the numbers. WrestleMania 28 had the biggest buy rate in not just Mania history, but WWE's entire pay-per-view history. And it's hard to deny that it was off the back of Cena versus Rock. When they first announced the match in advance, April 1st, 2012 was all I could look forward to. And as fans, we all picked a side. You were either Team Rock or Team Cena. There was just no in between. And the bill with these promos, I mean, you have 2 guys who are just masters at grabbing an audience's attention with the microphone in their hands. But what made them even better was the fact that there was this real life tension between Cena and Rock, which fueled them to bring some of the very best out of each other. These dudes were even wilding on each other on social media when that was just starting to pop off. And shit, that video package with Invincible by Machine Gun Kelly is just iconic in its own right. And when we finally get to Mania 28 and these 2 men were face to face in the ring, it was like time stood still. On that night, we had Punk versus Jericho, we had End of an Era, but everyone was here for John Cena versus The Rock. And sure, it wasn't a 5-star classic, it wasn't the best match of either man's career, but man, we didn't care. They had us hooked to every last move and moment from the second the bell rang because we were witnessing something we'd never thought we'd see before. Once in a lifetime was a perfect tagline for it. Now, one can argue, and I'm one, that maybe The Rock shouldn't have won this match because it made their unnecessary twice-in-a-lifetime rematch the next year kind of inevitable. But I digress, because in that moment, none of that mattered. The way they built this for an entire year, making the match feel bigger and bigger as we got closer to it, the way the fan base is split, we'd never seen nothing like that. And I'm always going to be appreciative of this because, hey, I didn't witness Hogan versus Warrior live. I didn't witness Austin versus Rock live. Hell, Hogan versus Rock was 5 months before I was even born. But this, the lead up and actually being there and seeing it all play out in real time, I'm always going to love to say I was there. Okay, look, I might be cheating a little bit here, but hey, it's my list. And if it bothers you, you can just tweet your displeasure at NarcolepsyBoy94 on X. But in all seriousness, it's Daniel Bryan versus The Authority, right? And you know what's funny? WWE told one of their greatest underdog stories ever, despite the fact they were literally trying to undermine said story because it wasn't their original plan. Don't believe me? How about them moving Bryan into a story with the Wyatt family while basically transferring the yes chance to the Big Show while he fought The Authority? Or how about having Batista win the Royal Rumble in 2014 despite everybody wanting it to be Daniel Bryan, who wasn't even put in the Rumble that year? Or even out of kayfabe, them literally having Bryan versus Sheamus penciled in for Mania 30 that year. I don't know either. But the thing is, despite them trying to fight it, Daniel Bryan's popularity wasn't just some flavor of the month type of thing. This was a super talented guy that had worked so hard to get himself over to the point that it wasn't only nuclear, but undeniable. And without knowing what we know, what they put on screen worked out beautifully. That Randy Orton cash-in at SummerSlam 2013 was one of the most shocking and heartbreaking moments in that show's history. And from that point forward, every time it looked like Bryan would climb right back to the top of the mountain, there was the Authority to step on his hands and make him start the climb again. Whether it was Bryan actually winning back the title at Night of Champions, but then having it taken away from him a day later because the ref actually did a fast count. Or Shawn Michaels screwing him over at Hell in a Cell when he was a special guest referee. The Authority just kept throwing these hurdles in front of Bryan while trying to label him a B+ player, but all that did was make fans want Bryan to succeed even more than they already did. And then we got the incredible Occupy Raw segment, which led to everything that happened at WrestleMania 30. First, the classic opener where Bryan pins Triple H to get himself into the WWE title match. And then the cathartic main event where Bryan finally gets it done with nobody able to take that moment away from him or the fans for that matter. And like I said, even though they didn't really want to do it, when WWE's backed into a corner, they end up producing some of their best ever work, and this was just perfect example of that. So for the first time in this video, we're actually going to go over to good old black and gold NXT. And with that, there's another first because we're actually going to talk about a women's feud. You see, before Stephanie McMahon created women's wrestling on the main roster, the Divas Revolution was already in full swing over in NXT, off the work of women like Paige, Emma, and of course the Four Horsewomen. But nothing really caused the shift the way that the feud between Sasha Banks and Bayley did. So they had one of the simplest but usually engaging stories to tell, Bayley being this lovable underdog that always came up short when she would go for the NXT women's title, Sasha being the top woman in the division after beating everyone there was, and in her mind, Bayley was not even close to her level. And what played into that so well was the fact that Bayley was the only one of the horsewomen that was left behind when the other three got called up to Raw and SmackDown. And that was set the stage for their epic encounter at TakeOver Brooklyn, which wasn't just one of the best women's matches I've ever seen, but one of the best matches I've ever seen, full stop. And what that match did was showcase how the women were just as capable of putting on classics like the men. And anyone that would say otherwise, you low-key just lying to yourself. And that visual of all four horsewomen in the ring is like a pinpoint moment of when the women's division really started to take off, not for just NXT, but the WWE as a whole, which was just doubled down on by Bayley and Sasha main eventing TakeOver Respect with the first ever 30-minute Iron Woman match, which I feel doesn't get enough, well, respect. The match starts as a normal, friendly affair, but as time starts ticking, Sasha starts tapping back into that vicious side of hers, throwing Bayley into an LED board and making Izzy cry. And then you got Bayley showing her elevation from underdog to resilient champion, just barely sneaking out of there with the win in the final seconds of the match. And both women being given their flowers in the literal sense after the match was quite fitting. Because after what they did at back-to-back takeovers, there was just no going back for the women. You couldn't go back to bra and panties. You couldn't go back to not treating them like they matter. And well, we've seen all the history that they've made ever since. 2016 is a very nostalgic year for so many, and even though it's not the best year in WWE history or anything like that, it was the time of my peak wrestling fandom. Especially after WrestleMania 32, WWE was becoming more and more enjoyable as time went on. Now, in terms of feuds, it didn't get any better that year than the rivalry that seemed impossible just a year before. So yes, I am going with John Cena versus AJ Styles. Just from that first face-off that they had on that Monday Night Raw, it had a special kind of energy in the air. Mr. WWE in the ring with Mr. TNA. And these two played off each other so well, especially with AJ embracing the heel side here and making it his mission to beat up John Cena. And I mean, you want to talk about the matches? Come on now. AJ Styles was arguably still the best wrestler in the world at the time, and when John Cena's in there with the right opponent, he is also money. First, you had a banger at Money in the Bank with a super hot crowd for this dream match. AJ getting the win off an interference from Gallows and Anderson put a bit of an asterisk on it, but all of that got overshadowed by an even better match, simply put, one of the greatest matches in SummerSlam history, where AJ would actually pin John Cena clean in the middle of the ring, which was super rare for the time. And when you think about what the feud did for both guys involved, for Cena, it was another series of bangers for him to continue to silence that crowd of people that swore up and down that he couldn't wrestle. But even bigger, for AJ, it solidified him in the WWE as a mainstay in that main event scene, which they immediately capitalized on by having AJ win the WWE title just a few weeks after that big win at SummerSlam. And hey, shout out to that triple threat they had at No Mercy that also had Dean Ambrose involved. And even if you want to talk about the promos, this feud saw some of John Cena's best ever work on the microphone, and for a guy that isn't even known for his promo ability, AJ even stepped up his game in that department. And now in 2025, just a day before y'all see this, we're gonna see them do this one more time, and we're gonna get to see AJ try and beat up John Cena just one last time. So 2017 isn't exactly a year with any crazy or elaborate storylines, so I just went with one that just entertained the fuck out of me every time they interacted. And that is Braun Strowman versus Roman Reigns. And this feud could be defined in just 3 simple words. It's on sight. I mean, just look at Roman just big chilling after chopping it up with Shawn Michaels, and then bam! And you know, this could have just been used as a feud to make Roman look stronger, and that's it. But nah, they actually use this as an opportunity to make Braun Strowman look like the dominant force he should have been his entire career. From him tipping over the ambulance with Roman in it to him actually walking away from a literal attempted murder by Roman with an ambulance. And yes, Roman was the babyface. Don't question it. And even their matches exceeded a lot of expectations. Both the Fastlane and Payback matches hit. We got a really fun ambulance match at Check's Notes. great balls of fire, Lord have mercy. And to me, the best match that they had together one-on-one was their super underrated last man standing match on Raw leading up to SummerSlam, with another cherry on top being that chaotic fatal four-way also involving Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar at SummerSlam. And well, it looks like Samoans named Joe just can't avoid chairs being beamed at their faces, but there you go. And honestly, talking about this makes me realize just how actually good the main event scene was in mid-2017 on Monday Night Raw. But you know what SmackDown was doing at the time? Don't take me back. But hey, shout out to the Usos and the New Day for those tag graps that we had throughout the end of the year. Alright, so let's go back to Black and Gold NXT and what I would consider NXT's greatest year in terms of stories. And that probably has to do with the fact that this was the year we saw NXT's greatest ever story with Johnny Gargano versus Tommaso Ciampa. And what made this so great was the fact that it wasn't just the basic tag team breakup of betrayal and wanting revenge. There was also these layers of manipulation and obsession. And I'm gonna try and break it all down as concise as possible because it is a lot, but bear with me. Of course, there's the breakup of DIY at TakeOver Chicago where Tommaso Ciampa turns on who we thought was his best friend and his brother even, and Johnny Gargano. But Ciampa's knee injury from that same show gave Johnny the time to build himself into a single star that the fans loved even more in Ciampa's absence. But after Johnny had come up short again against Andrade for the NXT title at TakeOver Philly in a classic, the biggest ghost of his past would hit him in the back with a crutch, and that crutch would once again be used as a weapon in Johnny's downfall, costing Gargano not only the NXT championship, but also his NXT career. But Johnny, so hell-bent on revenge, would show up again and again at Ciampa's expense. And I gotta say, Tommaso Ciampa's heel work during this time was just immaculate, to the point his theme music was literally boos and fuck you Ciampa chants. But that would bring us to their brutal unsanctioned match at TakeOver New Orleans where Johnny was reinstated to NXT after making Ciampa tap out, using Ciampa's own knee brace against him. But then there's their street fight rematch at TakeOver Chicago a whole year after the breakup. And this is where Tommaso will start manipulating Johnny's obsession for him for his own benefit. In this match, Ciampa will not only steal Johnny Gargano's wedding ring and spit on it, but also throw it into the crowd. And when Johnny realizes it, he goes into a fit of uncontrollable rage until Ciampa takes advantage and hits him with a draping DDT on exposed wood to pick up the win. But this is where Johnny's obsession really started to break him. First, when trying to stop Ciampa from winning the NXT title from Aleister Black, he accidentally helped Ciampa achieve the dream that he himself wanted so badly. Then before a triple threat between all three men could even take place, Aleister Black got taken out in the parking lot. So now at TakeOver Brooklyn 4, we got one more match between Ciampa and Gargano in a last man standing match for the NXT title, where Johnny's recklessness in the pursuit of revenge caused him to injure his knee, which gave Ciampa the opening to take advantage and retain the championship. And before he could even go back after Ciampa, it was revealed that Johnny was the one that took out Aleister Black, because in his mind, he had to be the only one to take the NXT title from Tommaso Ciampa. So basically, Johnny's obsession with Ciampa is actually what turned him into what he hates the most. It slowly turned Johnny's rebel heart into a black heart. And look, there's so many more details that I had to leave out because otherwise we'd be here all day, but I highly recommend just binging this feud because it is perfection. And this feud in my eyes is the perfect example of what made NXT so special at this time. Because yeah, you had your amazing in-ring matches, but with that came deep and layered storytelling that really hooked you in the way the main roster just wasn't doing at the time. And it sucks that we didn't get the perfect payoff to the story in 2019 with Gargano actually beating Ciampa for the NXT title. But hey, as a consolation prize, we got arguably the best feud in NXT history in terms of just match quality with Gargano versus Adam Cole. And that could have easily been the answer for 2019 just because of how incredibly amazing those matches were. But hey, I went with one that personally meant a lot more to me and I think had a better story. The WWE in 2019 gets a pretty bad reputation, and deservedly so. Video on the way. But something felt different in the early part of the year because it felt like fans were getting exactly what they were asking for. From Johnny Gargano finally winning the NXT title to us finally having a full-time Universal Champion in Seth Rollins. Ignore the reign that came after it. And even Becky Lynch after her insane rise in popularity closing WrestleMania as double champion. But I did say this was a personal choice, and well, as a West African myself, nothing has meant more to me in pro wrestling than Kofi Mania, so I'm going with Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan. Another example on this list of WWE catching lightning in a bottle and arguably capitalizing on it better than the previous example on this list. I mean, Kofi didn't go on to lose to Shane McMahon for no reason later that year, so Mustafa Ali getting hurt before the Elimination Chamber was a blessing in really bad disguise. But after Kofi took his spot for that year's WWE Championship Elimination Chamber match, little did we know what we were in store for. First, you had Kofi's near hour-long performance in the gauntlet match where he pinned 3 straight people, including the WWE champion Daniel Bryan himself. And when AJ Styles just wanted him to quit, Kofi reminded us all that he had been here for 11 years grinding, but never getting that opportunity. He might have lost the gauntlet, but on that night, he won the hearts of so many people that now wanted to see Kofi in that top spot. And when the chamber match came down to Bryan and Kofi, they made a lot of us believe that Kofi could actually get it done in one of the best final 2s in chamber history. But when Bryan actually pinned Kofi, you could hear a pin drop in that building because of how heartbroken everybody was when it didn't happen. But that wasn't it, because now all fans wanted to see was Kofi getting his moment in the sun. And unlike with Bryan in 2014, WWE just went along with it. And honestly, Daniel Bryan deserves so much more love than he already gets for how great he was in the storyline. Him using his own history of being a B+ player and then being this hypocrite when he projects that label onto Kofi was just perfect. Then you got Vince throwing these hurdles at Kofi, leaving him out of the WWE title match at Fastlane. Then 2 gauntlet matches, which the gauntlet matches did get a bit excessive, I will say that. But man, that moment of the Usos, who are the New Day's greatest rivals, forfeiting their part in the gauntlet match to make sure Kofi gets his opportunity at WrestleMania is genuinely one of my favorite moments in WWE history. Absolutely fantastic storytelling. And of course, there's the match at Mania, which was an absolute banger, and the moment of Kofi Kingston actually pinning Daniel Bryan to finally win the WWE Championship after 11 years is one of the most satisfying and beautiful moments that we'll ever see. And look, I get the run itself wasn't all that amazing and it ends even worse, but honestly, I don't even care that much because we'll always have that moment and we'll always have that lead up of Kofi Mania. And sometimes it's all about the moment. Also, 2019 didn't exactly give us much to smile about, so I'm gonna just take this and cherish it as much as I can. Like I said, video on the way. Stay tuned. All right, folks, that is the best WWE feud from every year of the 2010s, man. Did you disagree, agree with the list? Let me know what your thoughts were in the comments down below. If you did enjoy the video, let me know that in the comments. Let me know what kind of videos y'all want to see me do. I'm down to take requests. Like, comment, share, subscribe, man. I am locked in on this channel, man. I've been off and on, but now I'm mentally locked in. I'm back with it. I'm planning on posting at least 1 video every single week. I want y'all, the audience, to keep me on track. Make sure y'all call me out if I'm not keeping up with that schedule. But we are locked in, so stay locked in with me. I appreciate y'all for watching. I'll see you on the next one. I'm out of here. I'm gone.